Someone left a comment on my last post, mentioning they'd heard a story about something similar happening to someone they knew, about a child who came into a family's life, and strange, almost supernatural events started to unfold. At first, I didn't think too much of it. I mean, people say all kinds of things online, right? But the more I think about it, the more I realize that maybe, just maybe, I'm not the only one going through this. I haven't been able to shake the feeling that whatever's happening here isn't just in my head. It's like there's a thread connecting all of these strange occurrences, a thread I can't quite see, but I know it's there, pulling tighter with each passing day. And now, after what just happened, I'm convinced that something is terribly wrong. I've been watching him more closely. The boy, I mean. It's hard not to. Ever since the note appeared on my doorstep, I've been hyper aware of every little thing. The way he moves around the house, the way he looks at me, there's something off. I keep telling myself that it's just my imagination, that he's just a quiet kid dealing with a new environment, but I can't shake this feeling that there's more to it than that. Yesterday was different though. Yesterday, something happened that I can't explain. It started in the afternoon. I was in the living room, trying to relax after another sleepless night. Yeah, the nightmares haven't stopped. Then I noticed that the boy was nowhere to be seen. Normally, he stays within eyesight, playing with his toys or watching TV, but this time he had disappeared. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was in his room or in the kitchen getting a snack. But after a few minutes of silence, I started to get that familiar knot in my stomach. I called his name, but there was no answer. I checked his room, the kitchen, even the bathroom, but there was nothing. I was just about to panic when I heard a noise coming from the basement. Now, I haven't been down in the basement since I moved in, except to store a few boxes. It's not a place I ever spend much time, mostly because it's cold, damp, and frankly, a little creepy. But the sound was unmistakable. It was the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing back and forth. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, listening, hoping that maybe it was just the house settling or the wind outside. But then I heard it again, louder this time. There was no mistaking it. Someone was down there. I don't know why, but my first thought was that the boy had somehow wandered into the basement and was just hanging out. But as I stood there, trying to convince myself that it was nothing, the air around me felt heavier. It felt like something was pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I called his name again, louder this time, but again, no answer. I grabbed the flashlight from the hall closet and descended the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The sound of my own footsteps echoed off the stone walls, but I could still hear that soft, shuffling noise in the distance, like someone or something was moving around down there. When I reached the bottom, I swung the flashlight around, scanning the basement. It was empty. The boxes were still stacked in the corner, untouched, and there was no sign of the boy. But that didn't make sense. Where else could he have gone? And then I heard his voice. It came from the far corner of the basement, just beyond the reach of the flashlight's beam. It was quiet at first, almost like he was whispering to someone, but there was no one else there. My heart was pounding in my ears as I slowly moved toward the sound, trying to make out what he was saying. I called his name again, my voice shaking, but I received no response. In fact, it was like he didn't even acknowledge my existence. Then the whispering suddenly stopped, but the feeling in the air didn't. It was like the whole basement was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I took another step forward, and that's when I saw him. He was standing in the corner, facing the wall, his back to me. His arms hung limply at his sides, and he was completely still, not moving, not making a sound, just standing there. My flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. I could feel my pulse racing, my breath coming in short gasps. Something about the way he was standing, so still, so unnaturally quiet, made my skin crawl. I approached cautiously while quietly calling out to him, trying to see if he was okay. He didn't move. I stepped closer, reaching out to touch his shoulder, and that's when he turned around. I swear to God, what I saw still haunts me. His face. God's face. His face was not the face I knew. His facial features were elongated and distorted. His bone structure was twisted and warped, and his skin was pale and old. It was like someone just grabbed his lower jaw and just kept pulling. And then there were his eyes. His eyes were black, completely black, like they had been hollowed out, void of any life or soul. But it wasn't just that. It was the way he looked at me. It was like he wasn't really seeing me, like I wasn't there. No, it was like it was trying to see into me, trying to read me. For a moment, I froze. I didn't know what to do. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. And then, without warning, he smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile a child should have. It was too wide, too forced, like his lips were being pulled back by invisible strings. And then he spoke. He spoke in the lowest and the raspiest voice I ever heard, saying, "She's here." My blood ran cold. Barely getting the words out, I weakly asked whatever I was encountering, "Who was here?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at me with that twisted grin on his face, his black eyes reflecting the beam of the flashlight. And then, without warning, it stopped. His eyes returned to normal, the grin disappeared, and he blinked, looking up at me like nothing had happened. Then, with his normal voice, he asked for a snack. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, staring at him, my heart racing, my hands shaking. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing. Like, what the fuck did I even witness? Was the lack of sleep and the stress of everything finally catching up to me? But then, how do I explain what I saw and heard? Does stress lead you to hallucinate possessions? While I grappled with whether I had a grip on reality or not, he walked past me, heading up the stairs like nothing had happened, leaving me standing there in the dark. After a few minutes, I finally forced myself to move. I followed him upstairs, my mind racing, trying to rationalize what just happened. That night, of course, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day over and over in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, those black eyes, and that twisted grin. And I kept hearing his voice in my head. "She's here." Who was this she that things spoke of? The next morning, I tried to talk to him about it, but he didn't remember anything. Or at least he claimed he didn't. He acted like it was just another day, like nothing unusual had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That whatever had happened in the basement had left a mark on him. And on me. Later that day, I called Richard, the friend who had come over last time. I told him about the basement, about the black eyes, about the voice. He listened, but I could tell he was struggling to believe me. I don't blame him. If someone had told me this story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. But then something strange happened. As we were talking, Richard's voice cut out. At first, I thought it was just a bad connection, but when I called him back, he didn't answer. A few minutes later, he texted me saying that his phone had died. Except it wasn't his phone. He said that right before the call dropped, he heard a voice. A whisper. It said the same thing the boy had said in the basement. "She's here." Richard hasn't called me back since. Now, I'm at a loss. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm losing control of the situation. This thing, whatever it is getting stronger. And the boy. Well, he's different. He was always a bit quiet and distant, but now it is much more extreme. And every time I look at him, I can't help but wonder if the thing I saw in the basement is still inside him. So, I'm asking for help. I don't know who else to turn to. If any of you have any experience with this kind of thing, if you've seen or heard anything like this before, please let me know. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that everything's okay. Because it's not. And I need to figure out what's happening before it's too late. I'll post again if things develop further. Signing off. For more chilling stories, like and subscribe.